Since the order arrived. Is this a complete sentence? Do you understand what is being expressed? No, you do not. Since the order arrived does not express a complete thought. You would be asking the question, since the order arrived, what? What happened? We must add something to complete the thought. For example, we might say, since the order arrived, we have completed the project. In the sentence, since the order arrived, we have completed the project, there are two distinct parts, and each part contains a subject, which is the noun, and a predicate, which contains the verb. Since the order arrived contains the subject order and the verb arrived. We have completed the project contains the subject we and the predicate have completed the project, which contains the verb have. These two parts of the sentence, each of which contains a subject and a predicate, are called clauses. Since the order arrived is a clause and we have completed the project is a clause. There is, however, an obvious difference between these two clauses. We have completed the project expresses a complete thought. It could stand as a sentence by itself. For this reason, it is called an independent clause. On the other hand, the clause, since the order arrived, cannot stand by itself as a sentence. It does not express a complete thought. The word since makes it dependent upon the rest of the sentence. For this reason, this clause is called a dependent clause. It depends upon the independent clause, we have completed the project, to make sense. Hello everyone, I'm Paula. Welcome to my channel where I bring you insightful English grammar lessons to improve your knowledge of English. But before I go any further, may I ask you please to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of my lessons. In today's lesson, I will be teaching you about independent and dependent clauses, how they are used, and how you may identify them. At the end of this lesson, I will give you a short quiz to test you. So, what is an independent clause? An independent clause is a clause that forms a complete thought. It can stand on its own as a complete sentence, and it contains a subject and a predicate. The subject performs the action, and the predicate is a part of the sentence or clause that tells us what the subject does or is. It includes the verb. Let's look at this sentence, which is also an independent clause, as an example. We have completed the project. The subject in this sentence is we, and the predicate is have completed the project. The verb in the predicate is have. Here's another example of an independent clause. Mr. Brown told John that he was fired. The subject is Mr. Brown. The predicate is told John that he was fired, and the verb is told. So, the independent clause is a complete sentence. It stands on its own and it expresses a complete thought. Now, what is a dependent clause? The dependent clause is the part of the sentence that does not express a complete thought. It cannot stand on its own as a complete sentence. It contains a subject and a verb, and it usually starts with a subordinating conjunction. Let's look at some examples. Since the order arrived. This is an incomplete sentence. It does not make sense on its own. You would be asking, what happened since the order arrived? Order is the subject and arrived is a verb. Since is the subordinating conjunction. The subordinating conjunction makes this clause dependent upon the rest of the sentence. If we removed the subordinating conjunction from this clause, we would have a complete sentence. The order arrived. So, the dependent clause, even though it has a subject and a verb, the subordinating conjunction makes it depend on the independent clause to complete its meaning. Examples of subordinating conjunctions are since, although, as soon as, because, until, and whenever. Now let's look at some examples of dependent clauses. Although we received your invitation. This is a dependent clause. It makes no sense on its own. The subordinating conjunction, although, makes this clause incomplete. It has to depend on an independent clause to make sense. If we added the independent clause, we were unable to attend the function. Our sentence now makes sense. We were unable to attend the function, although we received your invitation. Here's another example. Because our favorite artist did not perform. This is a dependent clause. The subordinating conjunction, because, makes this clause incomplete. It needs an independent clause to complete its meaning. If we add the independent clause, we left the concert, our sentence would be complete. We left the concert because our favorite artist did not perform. In our examples, you will notice that the independent clause precedes the dependent clause. This does not have to be so in all cases. We could reverse the order of these two clauses by placing the dependent clause before the independent clause, and our sentence would still make sense. However, when the dependent clause precedes the independent clause, a comma is used to separate the clauses. As you will notice in this example, we left the concert is the independent clause and it precedes the dependent clause because our favorite artist did not perform. If we reverse the clauses and place the dependent clause before the independent clause, our sentence still makes sense. Because our favorite artist did not perform, we left the concert. Notice that a comma is used to separate the clauses. Here's another example. We were unable to attend the function, although we received your invitation. We were unable to attend the function is the independent clause. It precedes the dependent clause, although we received your invitation. Note that the dependent clause always starts with a subordinating conjunction. In this case, the subordinating conjunction is although. Note also that no comma is necessary to separate the clauses when the dependent clause follows the independent clause. If we reverse the clauses and place the dependent clause before the independent clause, our sentence would not lose its meaning, and the clauses are separated by a comma. Although we received your invitation, we were unable to attend the function. Let's look at some examples of joining the dependent clause with the independent clause. As soon as we heard the news, we rushed to the hospital. As soon as we heard the news is the dependent clause. We rushed to the hospital is the independent clause. The dependent clause begins with the subordinating conjunction as soon as, and both clauses are separated by a comma. Our next sentence is, Tom failed his exam because he missed some classes. Tom failed his exam is the independent clause. Because he missed some classes is the dependent clause that begins with the subordinating conjunction because. No comma is necessary to separate the clauses because the independent clause precedes the dependent clause. Here's another example. We kept calling until it was too late. We kept calling is the independent clause. It expresses a complete thought. It can stand on its own. Until it was too late is the dependent clause. Until is the subordinating conjunction that makes this clause dependent. Until it was too late does not express a complete thought. And our last example is, after they left the concert, the girls went to visit their aunt. After they left the concert is the dependent clause. It does not express a complete thought. It starts with the subordinating conjunction after. The girls went to visit their aunt is the independent clause. It expresses a complete thought. Because the dependent clause precedes the independent clause, a comma is used to separate the clauses. Now, to test yourselves, let's do a short quiz. Identify which clause is an independent clause and which is a dependent clause. Remember that the independent clause expresses a complete thought. It can stand on its own. And the dependent clause does not express a complete thought. The dependent clause usually starts with a subordinating conjunction. Each clause has a subject and a predicate that contains the verb. You may pause the video to write your answers. Number 1, although it was raining. Number 2, Mark has made many new friends. Number 3, since he moved to the city. Number 4, when the bell rang. Number 5, the phone rang. Number 6, while she was cooking. Number 7, unless you finish your homework. And number 8, he stayed up late to finish his project. Let's now check our answers. Number 1, although it was raining. This clause begins with a subordinating conjunction, although. It has a subject, it, and a predicate, was raining, but it does not express a complete thought, so this is a dependent clause. If someone expressed this thought to you, you would be asking, what happened? Number 2, Mark has made many new friends. This clause expresses a complete thought. It would not leave you confused if expressed to you. So this is an independent clause. Number 3, since he moved to the city. We may ask, what happened since he moved to the city? So this is a dependent clause. To complete this thought, we could add the independent clause in number 2. Since he moved to the city, comma, Mark has made many new friends. Number 4, when the bell rang. This is a dependent clause. It starts with the subordinating conjunction when. We may ask, what happened when the bell rang? Number 5, the phone rang. This is a short clause, but it expresses a complete thought. It has a subject, phone, and a verb, rang. So this is an independent clause. Number 6, while she was cooking. The subordinating clause, while, makes this a dependent clause. It does not express a complete thought. While she was cooking, what happened? Number 7, unless you finish your homework. Again, this is a dependent clause. It starts with the subordinating conjunction unless. And number 8, he stayed up late to finish his project. This is an independent clause. It expresses a complete thought. We could add one of the independent clauses from this list to make a complete sentence. We could add number 1. Although it was raining, he stayed up late to finish his project. Or we could say it in the reverse with the independent clause preceding the dependent clause. He stayed up late to finish his project, although it was raining. We would not need a comma for this sentence. Well, that's it for this lesson. I hope you found it useful. If you have not as yet subscribed to my channel, may I ask you to do so now, and please turn on the notification bell so that you won't miss any of my lessons. Thank you again for joining. See you next time. Bye-bye.